So I would like to officially call to order the Friday, July 10th meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission, and pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to view and participate in this meeting while in progress may do so by visiting the agenda on the town website, where you will find information to call in. A record of this meeting shall be posted to continue our regular process in doing so. And as always, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
I'm Jeff Bryan.
Laurie Stevenson.
Emily Winter.
William Payne.
McNamara.
Perfect. All right. First up this evening. Oh, do I have the right one? Yep, 269. Okay. So first up this evening, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open a public hearing regarding a request for determination of applicability under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, regarding the proposed barn demolish and rebuild of existing barn structure adjacent to the single-family home located at 269 Harvard Road. Do we have an update on this?
So this is a new filing. We had previously discussed the addition that has gone on. I believe you can see my mouse, correct?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Oops. So this is where the addition was. The new proposed structure is here. That was when we were on site. It's at the rear of the home, away from Harvard Road, and we had stated that they would need to file another request for determination or notice of intent because it's a separate structure and we were already about halfway through the permitting process for this structure. They're looking to, from my understanding and reading the documentation, to demolish and then build within the same footprint of the existing barn structure. But I believe there is a representative, if the commission would like to acknowledge them. It's Kurt Plant for 269 Harvard Road.
We would love to acknowledge Kurt Plant and have him give a rundown quick. It'd be great.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Friday night. Not what I had planned. I'm sure not what you had planned. But I do appreciate the efforts that you're all making. So again, Rebecca had pretty much kind of stated what we were doing. There's an existing single-story structure that is falling apart and it's being held up by a lot of temporary jacks and posts. The existing foundation is falling apart, if you noticed in the rear. And the occupants that bought the house last spring had always intended to replace the barn, and they're ready to do so. It's the same footprint, 48 by 48. It is a single-story barn. There's two elevations on the left and the right side, which would be the north and the south side, which are small, kind of like lean-to sheds against a higher middle section of the barn, which is a little bit higher. I think you may have a schematic of that in your filing. It's a post and beam structure. It'll have a concrete slab. It's all metal exterior cladding, I believe. And I'm not sure what the purpose of the barn is for. I think it's a combination of storage and livestock. And that's about it. We did take a lot of the material that we excavated from the addition and placed it on the easterly side of the building. Everything's been loam and seeded. So we're just going to phase 2 of what they had started last year.
Could you remind me, or Rebecca, is there any way to show us on the map where it's jurisdictional to us, what resource areas it is in or on?
It's within the 100-foot buffer.
Right, the whole property is, right? Or
The majority of it, yes.
okay,
Yep.
yeah, that's.
So
I'm trying
this
to remember
is,
the property.
yeah, and I apologize, this plan doesn't show it, but your wetland is over here on this side of the existing easement that's shown on this plan, but it's a gravel driveway.
Yep.
And this was the new addition that was permitted, and then it's somewhat of a field before that large stand of trees at the rear of the property. So this is between that large stand of trees and then the existing home. And of course, to the opposite side of the drive than the wetlands themselves.
Right.
Did the existing barn have a foundation?
Cinder block.
Okay, so is that being replaced or just are you building on top of that original
Oh.
foundation?
No, it's literally falling apart.
Okay.
So we're removing everything
Yep.
that exists there now, and in its place, putting a pole barn in.
And how do you know how deep the original like how much deeper are we going with the new walls?
Well, I think the walls from at least the backside that I can see are about 4 feet deep. Well,
Existing or proposed?
no, the existing.
Okay.
Let me put it to you this way. The elevation is not really supposed to change much. But when you walk in the front of the barn, obviously you're at grade. The elevation floor inside of the barn obviously goes level. But when you used to go to the back side of the barn, there was exposed cinder block.
Mhm.
But we raised the grade out in the back to have frost protection in the future. And so it's now, the grade has been built up. The wall hasn't been backfilled, but you can see where we added some material and sloped it off and graded it so that the runoff would actually go into the backyard, so to speak, as opposed to the left down to the driveway. The easement there's an easement which serves as single-family home in the back.
So the new wall has already been poured, you just haven't backfilled it?
No, we haven't done any work.
Oh, okay, got it.
Everything's
The
existing.
I'm just
soil is what he's
Trying to
talking
understand the
about.
total scope. So when you do build those new concrete walls, right, and you're going to do a slab on grade, are you going to have to bring the elevation up inside the footprint of the barn to do the slab on grade?
If it's brought up, it's only about 6 inches.
Okay.
There's not a foundation wall, it's a pole barn, so
Oh, okay.
they set their posts down into the ground and pour a cement pad at each post.
Okay.
So it isn't like we're excavating for a foundation.
Got it.
The contractor that does the pole barns is requiring me to just make a slab ready site for him, which will be gravel. He'll erect his pole barn, and then I'll complete the job by pouring a floor inside.
Do you have to do any kind of foundation pads for each pole?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that he augers those.
So we're
in
not
place.
digging and doing like a square concrete pad. It's more of a sonotube type of a
Correct.
situation?
That's my understanding. They also call them big feet. Another term that they use.
Isn't this what we saw at the pavilion for Slaters? Wasn't it the same kind of thing?
It was excuse me, it was similar, but I believe theirs sounded like it was a little bit more significant in terms of the footings associated,
Mhm.
but I'd have to dig out the file to confirm, but I believe it's a similar structure base.
Yeah.
I think they used helical piers.
Yeah.
At that project.
I was talking about the cement slab on top,
Oh, okay.
so I apologize.
Yeah.
Other question? Go ahead.
My only comments are regarding stockpiling of soil and if we want, if we're thinking about any kind of erosion control, but it doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot of excavation, minor excavation for the footings, and maybe some fill for the pad. But it sounds like that elevation change is being made up with gravel, so.
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be any need for stockpiling. If there was any material that needed to, if there was material that was not suitable underneath the slab, right where the printing is that says proposed barn and same footprint as existing area, that's a lower area that we could lose some of that. I think it's I would assume that it could be some organic material that's possibly under the slab. I have no idea. But if there was anything that was unsuitable, we could either lose it there or take it off site.
Yeah, so that may just be a condition that the commission clarifies, that whether they state it's outside of the 100-foot or, to be used elsewhere on site, just identifying that, but that's typical. So that's a good point that Emily brought up. In addition to it, even though it's minimal disturbance, just because it does slope down to the driveway there, it may be beneficial to still put out a wattle or some erosion control to just be able to define that work area.
Absolutely.
If I remember correctly, that was a big mess when we looked at it for the existing dwelling, right, Brian?
I'm remembering.
I remember
this one,
it's,
yeah. It's not a functioning barn as it stands now. I would say.
And it didn't seem like there's going to be much disturbance in the back of it that was already disturbed, if I remember correctly. It was just like a mess. I agree that there may be some erosion control along the existing easement on that thing that might help it, because it did seem to slope down there, but I think I don't have a real issue with it myself.
If I'm correct, that was the major elevation drop was going towards that easement or that driveway, right? Going towards the backyard, it went down, but it was a gradual drop, basically field almost.
Correct.
Yep, so there was a drop from, I believe it's the septic location down and again to the edge of that tree line. But then it gradually drops towards the tree line after that. And it's, like you said, it's maintained area.
Other questions from commission members on this?
Do we need to identify where construction materials should be stored during the building of the barn?
We can say within the driveway or outside of the 100-foot, if that suffices for the commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, that backyard, is the backyard outside of the 100-foot though? I'm just trying to think there.
I'm not positive where the line is. That's why I'm stating if it's outside the 100-foot or within the drive. If they can stockpile within the driveway or outside of the 100-foot, that limits and protects our jurisdiction.
Right, and the driveway basically it comes up the side of the house there. I'm just
it comes.
assuming they're gonna.
here.
That shouldn't be a major problem.
So maybe specify that it's to be stockpiled in the driveway associated with 269, so it's not confused for the easement for the driveway that goes to the rear past the barn.
Other questions?
You're not, just for clarification, there's a grass strip to the side of the driveway.
Yep.
To the left side. That's okay to stockpile there. I mean, it's just
The
wood.
left side of the driveway to 269.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously we're not going to use the easement area. It would be too
Right.
difficult. Yeah, that area, or even the area in the backyard between the barn, where it says existing barn to be removed.
Oh,
Anywhere between the back of the house and the barn. It's actually, yeah, right.
oops. Okay, I'm gonna stop doing this now. That's up to the commission, I would say, obviously.
I think from a construction standpoint, it makes more sense to have the materials out back, and then I'm assuming that there's going to be, are there machines lifting the beams and posts?
I would assume they're probably going to have some sort of lift in there.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's not that tall, so I really don't know their methods and means.
My only thought is that if there is some kind of a small machine moving those members, instead of having they're coming across the lawn next to the house or next to the driveway, they're just working right there by the work site behind the house in that lawn.
Right.
Yes.
That's just kind of my that's just my thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's narrow access to between the new garage that we built, so we can't cut that access off. So it would really make perfect sense to stockpile material where the red box is, and whether they use a skid steer, to pick up the beams and put them in place, might be the easiest thing for them to do. But again, I don't know how they're lifting them and putting them in place.
How far would you say the barn is behind the house? Like, is it 10 yards?
Oh, well, I don't know what the scale is on the drawing.
Yeah,
Maybe like 50 feet almost? No, not 50 feet.
I would say 60 to 75 feet.
All right.
If you using the 66.4 to the right there, I'm assuming it's around 70 feet.
I'm wondering if we could do a footage off the existing house, the stockpiling materials and construction vehicles to remain within whatever, which is 75 feet of existing primary home, and because that would hopefully just kind of limit it to the yard, and like you say, that section of grass on the side of the driveway coming in, but try to keep it from the back wetlands, and obviously they really can't store on the easement because that's a driveway or a neighbor's driveway. And again, that wouldn't be practical. I remember how it drops down to that driveway. Just curious if that would work for everyone.
What location, Ryan?
Saying
The square?
well, I was going to say if we say 75 feet from the existing house at 269, which would give them basically that whole backyard, 75 feet behind their house, so anywhere in the backyard,
Like
which is
between
kind
the
of
barn.
existing lawn.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and basically keeps them from going out of the wetlands as you go towards the far rear of the property, and then the wetlands on the whatever side the easement's on. I mean, it's just a steep slope down to somebody else's driveway. I'm not worried. I don't think they're going to be stockpiling there or trying to bring equipment in there.
Right.
So I was just trying to think if that's just a way to word it so it allows them the flexibility to use the backyard and that section off the side of the driveway, but keeps them out of the keeps them as far out of the buffer zone as we can expect.
I'm guessing they're going to want the materials by the construction site anyway, as opposed to having to trek 150 feet back and forth to pick up beams and posts. I think from a construction standpoint, it makes sense on their end, and then think that from our standpoint, now we don't have a machine going back and forth through the buffer, right?
Yeah.
It's a less traveled. I'm guessing that there aren't going to be like 2 people picking up beams and posts and walking them over to the barn to build it. I'm assuming there's some kind of small machinery.
I'm assuming you're right.
But just so that they're not moving back and forth which is closer to the, so I need a refresher. The wetland, if I'm looking at this plan, is to the left and to the rear of the property. Is that right?
There's wetlands on the northerly side, which is the left side property line, and the southerly side,
Okay.
the right side property line. I'm not aware of any wetlands towards the rear of the property.
Okay.
Other commission members with questions?
No, I do think there's like an intermittent stream, some sort of a stream that goes on the right side, Emily.
Okay.
You know, because the guy across the street, remember, it went underneath his barn at one time and
Yes.
somewhere. And I don't recall when we looked at it, the left side of it, looking at this, whether it was really wet, you know, but it wasn't.
Well, it's a
when I first
wetland.
looked at it, I didn't know there was
Yeah.
a driveway there. And then we went back and took another look and said, oh yeah, there's a driveway. But it doesn't seem like there was.
So just
much
about where
going
that
on.
bound is, it's a wetland, and the edge of wet extends
Okay.
out from there.
Yeah.
And it goes up to the driveway easement, and then it goes up again, steps up to the barn and the existing single-family home dwelling.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess my whole point is like the closer the materials are to the site, the less traffic there is going back and forth, which I think would be more invasive than having a stockpile. Like, I feel like the stockpiling behind the house is less invasive to the resource area than a small piece of machinery going back and forth multiple times to pick up materials and bring it over.
Sure.
So that's kind of where my theory, I guess, is.
I also tend to find that people stockpile on existing lawn, that they have the proper motivation to return it to existing lawn.
Right.
They have no intention of leaving that there any longer than they can, generally
Sure.
speaking. They're just hurting themselves. Okay. Is there, well, I should say, Rebecca, do you have additional questions, thoughts on this?
Nope, the only other question I have is if the commission wanted to do a site visit, but knowing that the majority, if not all of us, had been out there previously, if you're comfortable not, because you recall from the last site visit, that's fine as well.
I was to say, I'm fine. I can remember the property from my last site visit, but I'd be curious to hear what others have to say.
I have to say that I'm good with it. I remember what was going on with this barn. I thought it was going to fall down when we were at the site, but apparently it didn't.
Yeah, I'm all set with it, Brian. I remember.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody at our live home studio audience that has a question or any comments that you're aware of?
One moment. I'm not seeing any. Nope, I see none.
Okay. So to review, it looked like what we were asking was that the stockpiling of material, stockpiling of material should be done within the driveway or 75 feet from the existing home. Was everyone comfortable with that?
Mhm.
All right.
Yep.
What did we decide with any materials that needed to be removed? That any materials removed would be
I think that's covered in the stockpiling as well, maybe.
It sounded
think-
like too that the amount of fill, any fill taken out for the foundations, could just, can we just, they said they would leave it within the footprint of the barn anyway, if there was any elevation changes that needed to be made up for, so. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if that needs to be conditioned, but
I think you might be right. Did we have any thoughts on erosion controls? Again, from what I remember the site, I don't know how you would send probably something to the left or the north hand side of the barn, just where that slope drops off.
Yeah,
I remember they did
I
put,
would agree with that.
I would too. I remember they did put erosion controls along where the easement was, almost back to where the barn was when they did the addition. What's going on there?
All right.
Okay.
Anything else we had discussed? All right. Rebecca, would this look more like a -5 to you? Or negative
It would be a
3?
-3 to add in the conditions.
Okay. All right. So first and foremost, unless anybody has anything to add, I'm going to make a motion that we close the public hearing for a request for determination for 269 Harvard Road.
second.
All right. All those in favor, we'll go roll call. We'll go Jeff Bryant,
Aye.
Lori Stevenson,
Yes.
Emily Winter,
Aye.
Bill Payne,
Aye.
Kip McNamara,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. All right. Now I'd like to make a motion that we issue a -3 determination for the request for determination of applicability for 269 Harvard Road with the following conditions: that all stockpiled materials should remain within the driveway or within 75 feet of the existing structure associated with 269 Harvard Road.
Brian, I would
Go ahead.
add in the rear of the existing single-family home structure, just
Thank
so
you.
that we don't have 75 feet to the side or to the. You
Correct.
could even specify to the east of the structure
I
because
was
that's
gonna
the
say, all right.
directional. Yep.
So to clarify, that 75-foot zone would be to the east or rear of the structure, and as well as the existing driveway associated with 269 Harvard Road for stockpiling of materials. And that the applicant would install erosion controls to be approved and inspected by the town's conservation agent. And that is that. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, again, starting with Jeff,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Kip.
Yes.
Let's make it unanimous. I'm aye as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Kurt, I'm gonna mute you again. Okay, I am ready when you are, Brian.
All right. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now review under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233. And after the fact filing of notice of intent for the restoration work specific to 175 Fox Run Road filed by Hancock Associates. The public meeting to continue this evening at this time.
So we were just waiting for these updated plans. I was just checking the date of the last revision, which includes the change from the 3 feet in height reference to the 3-gallon pot size in reference to the plants. The others were related to some slight changes. One was the tilling of the soil versus stripping and adding new soil. And then the 75% success rate over 2 growing seasons for the restoration area and associated plantings. And then inclusive of reviewing the area for turf grass and making sure that that was not out competing the vegetation and the seeding that was done of the native plant species, again, associated with the restoration work. So we were just waiting for this plan so that we would be able to close out so they can start this work. Hopefully end of August.
So basically, it seems to me, looking through our minutes and stuff, that everything we discussed at the last meeting, the last few meetings on this, was added.
Yes.
Okay. Did we officially close last time?
No, because we couldn't, because
Okay.
then we wouldn't be able to accept the
To
plan.
take this. All right. So that said, I have to say, does anybody have any questions regarding these final plans as we received them? Okay. Is anybody in the audience, anybody here to comment on this evening?
I'm just checking quickly. I don't believe so. No.
All right. And Rebecca, do you have any final thoughts, concerns, or see anything? All right.
I do not.
In that case, I would like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for an after-the-fact filing of notice of intent for 175 Fox Run Road. Do I hear a second?
I
Okay.
second.
All right. All those in favor, starting again with Jeff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well.
So where this is an after the fact notice of intent associated with an enforcement order, the
Yep.
enforcement order, so the commission now needs to make a vote to accept the revised plans and associated conditions as discussed. And that it's not in order of conditions because it becomes part of the enforcement order.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So in that case, I would like to make a motion that the Conservation Commission accept the revised plans and associated conditions as discussed for the after the fact filing notice of intent for 175 Fox Run Road.
Second.
All those in favor, Jeff,
Yes.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
and I am I as well. While Rebecca's writing that down, did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes for the June 2nd meeting? And if anybody has any changes or corrections, please feel free. Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes for our June 2nd, 2020 meeting as drafted and submitted.
Second.
There you go.
Yeah.
All those in favor, starting with Jeff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
and I am an I as well.
We are still looking for a volunteer land steward. We seem to be maybe getting an application soon. I had an individual reach out to learn more about both the Conservation Commission and the volunteer land steward position. So we will see if that turns into something. Additionally, so the Taggart acquisition project updates. The Article 23 on the annual town meeting warrant passed with a majority vote at town meeting, and the ballot question was passed, again, associated with the acquisition of the 43-acre parcel in the amount of $550,000 off of 4 Bushmill Road, which we've been referencing as the Taggart parcel. And we received the majority for the ballot question on the 29th during town elections. So my question to the commission, in hopefully continuing the progression of reducing the cost to the town and also doing all that we can do to ensure that we are progressing forward with this, I would ask that the commission vote to acquire land utilizing the approved methods through the town meeting, including grant funding, just to solidify that. Additionally, to vote to utilize the conservation fund for the purposes of acquiring the Taggart parcel and any outstanding due diligence items associated with if we need like title searches. We already have the appraisal, that shouldn't be a problem, but legal ends of things, to be general about it. And then to support the application of the land grant, and which is from the state, and the MAPC grant, which is an accelerated climate resiliency, along with others to assist with the acquisition costs.
Does that include SVT?
Does what include SVT?
Other grants, other means of getting funding?
So it includes the other means of getting funding is left broad so that I would come back to the commission if there were another grant or if there was another opportunity. At this present time, the Board of Selectmen don't want to have a conservation restriction on the property. Again, at this time, in the future, maybe, specifically not held by Sudbury Valley trustees. So Sudbury Valley trustees has helped us. They've done mailings, they've stayed involved. They're aware of that as well. But they are staying slightly involved and helping with outreach, just in the event that there is an opportunity where they can assist, that they are able to do so.
Just for a future agenda, we should probably discuss that. I'd like to give the selectmen a recommendation, whether
Sure.
or not we should. I'm sure they got good advice before they decided we don't want one right now. It would have been nice to talk to them before they decided we don't want a conservation restriction right now. They didn't really lead this charge. So 1/3 against this.
Yeah.
It would have been nice for them to reach out and ask us if we thought there should be a conservation restriction.
So let me
placed on
clarify. I didn't say
Yeah.
they didn't want a conservation restriction. At this
Right.
time, they don't want to work. They were hesitant to be working in partnership with Sudbury Valley trustees to acquire the property. So that's the way I'm seeing it, as maybe in the future, Concom can go back and say, the trust still doesn't have the opportunity to do this, but we can still put a conservation restriction on the property. They didn't say specifically the conservation restriction, it was who they didn't
Right.
want to hold the conservation restriction,
Right.
just to clarify.
No, it's
But
fine.
I think that is a point. Yeah.
I don't know their background strong enough, but I would think when you're making decisions like that, you should maybe talk to the Concom about working with different land trusts. We probably know them better than them, and who knows, maybe they have an intimate knowledge of these land trusts and how they work and how they're involved, and they've been studying this for years. I honestly don't know, but it seems like if you're going to make a decision like that, you should actually talk to the conservation people. But
Yep.
Again, that's just an observation. Regardless, the 3 motions you just talked about, hopefully everybody sees those on their agenda. There's also the 4th motion to release the conservation funds to go towards paying for this. Did you want that
That's-
separate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So for the time being, those first 3 motions, just for expediency, does anybody have any questions, problems, or issues with those? Because then I might just move quickly through them if we're comfortable with them as they stand.
I'm all set.
All set.
Okay. All right, so get ready with your seconds. All right, I would like to make a motion to vote to acquire the Taggart land utilizing the approved methods through the town meeting, including grant funding.
I second.
All right, all those in favor, Jeff? Maybe.
Wait, yes, yes.
Okay.
I was just trying to.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip.
Aye.
All right, I'm an aye as well. I would now like to make a motion to vote to utilize the conservation fund for the purposes of acquiring the Taggart parcel and outstanding due diligence items. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting again with Jeff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip.
Aye.
All right. And lastly, I'd like to make a motion to vote to support the application for the land and MAPC grants for funding to acquire the Taggart parcel.
Second.
All those in favor, starting again with Jeff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well.
So now, if you would be so kind as to, I know we had approved it, but just a formal vote was asked just to ensure that we have that documentation to transfer. So for this past budget fiscal year that we're closing out, we allocated $100 in a conservation fund line item in order to fund our conservation fund, which is a separate account that carries year after year. So I would request that the commission votes to transfer that line item to the conservation fund as previously discussed.
Does everybody understand what's going on with that? And have any questions with it? All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion to transfer the balance of the conservation fund in the amount of $100 from the line item to the actual conservation fund.
Second.
All those in favor, Jeff,
Yes.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
and I am an aye myself.
We received an email from a resident in town who is attending the University of Maine. They are inquiring if they could carry out an internship with the conservation department for an amount of 40 hours. Again, volunteer hours, not paid, similar to the intern we have now. Where we have multiple properties and I would like to get forest plots on each of them, I definitely see that there's the time and ability for the 40 hours that he's requesting. And during this time, I think is a good time to be able to have students out in the property versus necessarily on the trails themselves. And I think it's a good learning experience, but I leave it up to the commission. The town administrator said it would be fine as long as I felt that I had the time to be able to supervise and oversee, but where it's really just a day, not even a whole day, maybe an hour or two of training, teaching them what they're looking for, what they're doing, and then sending them out, and then just periodically checking in. The forest plots are relatively easy to supervise.
Those were really only my questions. It's just if it seems like you're comfortable with this person, and if you would be able to oversee what they were doing, I think it's a good use of the land. I like seeing students trying to use it. Be interested if you had their resume or their request letter, if you could forward it around just to see
Yes.
who it was, but I'm not opposed to it. I don't know if anyone else is.
What do you mean by forest plot, by the way?
Sure. Good question. So forest plots meaning you're measuring out a specified area and you're identifying the understory vegetation, you're identifying leaf litter on the floor, if it's a gravel base or sand base, or something you can see, or is it covered completely? and then identifying by species specific, each of the trees within that plot that are greater than 6 inches in diameter at breast height.
So which one do you want to start with?
Well, so we've done Powder House from the back of Town Hall to the pipeline.
Pipeline.
I think it's a gas line.
I think it
I'm
is.
losing my train of thought right now. But
Yes, it is.
so to that point where the trail crosses, our intern now, has done 40 plots within that area. So what it does is it really gives us a good understanding of not only the succession of the forest, the age of the forest, but also the makeup of it. And that helps us not only with management and land planning, but also understanding it a little bit more, versus just being able to observe from the trails, but also observe what's a little bit further in off of the trails. It also helps to identify how much dead material there is, just in case that's a concern, being a fire hazard, but I don't have the data to say it's an extreme fire hazard. So
Thank you.
Anyone else opposed? I would say go for it, but again, I'd be curious to see your resume and what they're what they're hoping to get out of it.
I'll send the resume around this evening so that you have it, and then if anyone has any concerns, they can certainly voice those concerns early next week, for sure. If everyone's okay with that, we can move on.
Yes.
So one quick item is actually, we'll do this one first. I was curious, I put on the agenda whether or not the commission would want to consider and vote, if necessary, any exclusions from the Central Mass Mosquito Control treatment, meaning spraying, regarding our conservation properties. So properties that are specified in the deeds as managed and maintained by the Conservation Commission, or Chapter 40, Section 8C. So we have properties in town that we assist with, but that are not owned by the town, like the trust property or conservation restrictions, APRs. And we don't have too much because we don't own the property, and it doesn't reference specifically in the document that they can or can't spray. If it does reference in a conservation restriction what they can and can't do related to that, certainly we would be able to provide insight or comment on it. But for the most part, it is just our conservation property. So I figured I would pose this question to the commission. I would suggest, if the commission's considering it, as in all or none. It is a vehicle that drives along the roadway. They aren't hiking into the property, to my knowledge. If we are excluding properties, I do have to register them as such on behalf of the commission. And that's why I just wanted to inquire to the commission what your thoughts were on that, or if it wasn't a concern.
Is this just in regard to spraying? This does not affect any of the other work that is done in terms of like treating standing bodies of water, and would that only affect the spraying portion of the work?
So I can confirm that, but right now the question is only about the spraying. So if they come back and say, we can't do anything if you don't allow for spraying, then that's a separate issue. But currently it's just about the spraying exclusion.
Have we excluded conservation properties at this time, like town owned?
No.
No, nothing.
So at this time, unless you've gone in to directly exclude your property, the town included, it's going to be treated the same as others. They do have a 100-foot offset from fish-bearing waters. So I've highlighted here in sort of that blue aqua color, the cold water fisheries, which are definitely fish-bearing waters.
Okay.
We also have ponds within the town, which I've highlighted here on this map in the more, so you have West Pond, Little Pond, Bowers. So again, fish-bearing waters, they have to stay a specific distance away from, as
And that's 100
regulated by the
feet?
state to do.
That's 100 feet, Rebecca?
What?
Stay away from ponds by 100 feet or fish-bearing
From
water?
fish-bearing waters. Yep. So they don't specify the pond or what type of fish-bearing water it is, unless there's some sort of special interest that the state has mandated them to stay away from.
So when they hike in, do they hike in with backpack sprayers?
No, they don't hike in.
Okay.
Just
That's
for-
what I was specifing.
So they spray aerial
No,
No, it's from a truck.
from a
it's
truck.
from a truck.
I have a really hard time supporting spraying conservation property. And I think after going to the meeting over the winter, I got more comfortable about the spraying in general. But I almost feel like it's just, I don't know, to go in and spray our conservation property. I'm not really happy about spraying to begin with, but I understand the importance of it in the long run with the risks of triple E. But I don't know how I feel about, I'm curious to hear what other people have to say, because you can get triple E hiking on conservation lands, and that's still a risk and a threat. But at the same time, it's like we're trying to maintain these properties to be as natural as they could be. And I'm very, very torn, but I really feel uncomfortable spraying our conservation property in general.
No, I
But
have to agree with her.
Yeah. Quick question on that though. Do you have any sense how far the spray can infiltrate into the conservation property if they're just driving up and down the roads?
So they have to, that would be something I'd have to look up the statistic. They have, I want to say it's a 300-foot reach with the spray. But I would double check that point.
So just as an example, they would get out Woodman Drive, do the loop and spray around that loop, and that would be the way they would get to Vaughan Hill. Or, I mean, that's the only,
Or Green Road, or
Green
Vaughan
Road, yeah.
Hill, or
So
Vaughan
does-
Hill doesn't. Vaughan Hill doesn't.
Ballville. I mean,
yeah,
not
well,
Ballville, Bear Hill.
Bear Hill Road, so.
Yeah.
Emily,
I'm a little uncomfortable with it, to tell you the truth, but
Emily,
I'm
do you know
also a
if,
little confused about the spraying, and I'm only confused because when they were presenting at the meeting, my understanding was that the spraying would only be done in areas where they found a certain percentage of mosquitoes carrying triple E.
Yeah.
And that they would be doing testing locations, and then the spray locations would be based on what populations of mosquitoes were carriers of triple E. But then I've been hearing talk about them just spraying the whole town every other Monday lately. And I think a lot of people in town are panicking because that isn't how it was presented to us back in January or February, whenever that meeting was.
Right, so that would be a point of clarification that needs to be discussed with Board of Health and CMMCP regarding frequency and when they're doing it. It's my understanding as well that they're testing first. We
Yeah.
actually found a testing box or trap. So they are testing right now.
Oh, they've already started.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's another reason why we added it to the agenda, because we wanted to get on top of it if the commission wishes to exclude the conservation properties, because that needs to be documented as such as soon as possible, regardless of when or what they're doing. And that's why I wanted to bring it before the commission. But if the thought is we don't want to exclude the property, you know, that's up to the commission as well. But They are maintained for specific purposes. I can't speak for people's private yards, aside from within jurisdictional areas of the commission, that the commission has conditioned not to spray pesticides, herbicides, or use of fertilizers, which property owners should be aware of as they're going through this process. But in terms of we do have quite a few vernal pools on our conservation parcels. So that's something to think about as well. Many of them not right along the roadway, but still a concern. So what impact it may have, or what impact the treated mosquitoes may have to the resource areas. That's a question for CMMCP, which we addressed during the public meeting earlier in the year. But those are all things that go through my mind, certainly, when I'm asking that question.
And it was very, and when I had asked a question about, how it breaks down in water, and I can't remember the gentleman's name who did the presentation.
Tim.
Sam?
Tim.
Oh, Tim, right. Tim did say that, it breaks down in the sunlight. So if you have a vernal pool that is relatively shady, we don't really know what that does to the other living organisms, and how that changes the makeup of the water, where you have such a range of living things. So I kind of that's just a whole nother concern. And I just feel like it kind of goes against what we're trying to do on conservation properties, where we're trying to maintain the wildlife and the ecosystem, and while also offering, a recreation area for community. But I don't know, I have a really hard time with going in and just, unless the vernal pools they're not within that 100-foot offset, right? It's just the fish ways and ponds.
Yeah, I would have to re-review again, but it's just fish-bearing waters.
When you say review, what is it? Can you share with us what you're reviewing for
So what I'm reviewing, what I mean by review is I'm going to reach out to Board of Health and look through our minutes that are posted online to just see what the information given was and relay that. And I can certainly share the link of where those minutes are posted.
Yeah, that would help, because I have more questions than answers. I would like to read up on it a little bit.
Okay, so I guess for the time being, is there anything the commission would like to vote on, or do we want to just wait and leave this open-ended at this time?
Well, can I ask, is anybody here to comment on this audience-wise, or would like to comment on it?
Let me see.
Yeah, can you hear me? It's Betsy.
Yes.
Well, Betsy.
Hi. Yeah, I've been lurking here listening to all this. Yeah, I would just, I agree that, once we've had these hard fought battles like we just did with Taggart to get some properties protected, and some of that reason is obviously for animal habitat and the health of the ecosystems around it, that spraying, I mean, I'm thinking right down the hill from where I live is where Fifeshire is, and the pond is right at the road. And so they're going to be spraying along the road. It's going right out there where there's, all the water birds are out there and whatever else is living in that pond, which I'm sure is all kinds of stuff. That's just not a combination that sits easily with me. And also, for something like Taggart, we're saying we're protecting land, and then we're accepting, we're hoping to get state grants to do that. I don't know whether state grants have any limitations on, what you do with your property once you have it. But knowing that this is a state program, it probably is probably a wash, but I would encourage not to spray on the spaces that, especially as they're right next to the road, places that are next to the roads, the ponds, like West Pond, you drive right past the edge of the water and places like that. So, and even 117, Great Brook running all along there.
Well, they can't spray near Great Brook, right?
100 feet away.
100 feet
Right.
away.
Right. Well, some of Great Brook is on I noticed that the parts of what becomes Great Brook that say run through the town common property and all that, that's not highlighted, but I guess it's because it's small enough that there's no fish getting through it. So, but
Yeah, this is, so what I have highlighted too is also associated with perennial streams. So where a stream continues where it daylights. So it may not qualify as a cold water fishery and therefore is not on this map.
right.
But if you go to the other map, this map shows it. And so that shows
there
it
we are.
as a perennial stream, not a fish bearing water.
Not a fish. Okay.
Um,
But Water Aquatic Pond or Fifeshire is in that whole
Right.
section is,
yeah, that's North Brook that runs from the Parham land back there
Yep.
and then all the way down through into Berlin.
Okay. So that was just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks, Betsy.
Appreciate
Oh.
Any other audience members?
Let me check.
Doesn't look that way.
I see no one in the chat and I see no one else on the meeting except Betsy.
right.
So
All right. I don't know even how to perceive this, and I'd probably parrot everybody else myself. Like, generally speaking, I just think it's about, like, let's probably not spray conservation land. I can understand this is a well thought out plan relatively against mosquitoes, and I'd hate to be the weak link in the chain if we, if they're trying to eradicate a Zika strain and they just need to spray one area that we're stopping them. But overall, especially some of the conservation land we have that doesn't have public access, I'm trying to think of the ones like off Hudson Road, where it's strict conservation land. We don't allow public access. I'd hate to allow any spraying there. It just doesn't seem necessary. And I just I think it seemed like a number of people were leaning towards no spraying at all in the conservation lands, and I'd probably lean that way as well. I was just hoping we'd get more public commentary tonight. I really appreciate Betsy weighing in, but I'd just like to hear what the overwhelming thought would be.
Okay.
Rebecca, do you have strong thoughts? I should ask you as well.
I do, and I think I've already reflected what they are in the most concise way as possible. And that's just the concern about our vernal pools within these properties. But and the reason why I wanted to show this map specifically was because, one, not only to provide a visual of our conservation properties where they are within the town, but also reference those, the fish-bearing waters and our wetlands. And in addition to that, looking at the road frontage and comparing it to where those resources are. And there's a lot of areas where, like Betsy was talking about Fifeshire in particular, and that's an area that I would be concerned with as well because it's a water body right up against the roadway. But if they're considering the brook, maybe even the pond as well, as a fish-bearing water, then they have to stay 100 feet away anyway, so they wouldn't be spraying the entire frontage of Fifeshire. They'd be spraying the opposite side potentially. So that's what I'm looking at too, is there then a redundancy if the commission says, no, we don't want it all sprayed, but in fact, is there even going to be spraying along the road frontage? I can see a few points like over on Bear Hill Road, up Vaughan Hill towards the northwest of Bolton. And so there are some properties that don't meet that sort of double layer of having the 100-foot offset, but that's why I wanted to provide this visual and ask the question, because we do, like Betsy already stated, we protect these properties for a specific reason. We write conditions that say, don't spray, don't use pesticide, don't use herbicide. And those are things that are expected of the Conservation Commission to protect the natural resources and the water resources. So if we can say, no, we're not going to exclude any of our properties, and just by the mandate of CMMCP from the state, they are unable to spray the conservation properties, great. But I would need to understand that more clearly in terms of what their offsets are and when and what they can and can't spray, because maybe, like I said, it becomes a moot point. But at the same time, do we want to create the redundancy to say we want to exclude the property? If they come back and say, well, we can't spray it anyways, I think that's sufficient as well.
All right. Do we know when the first spraying is coming up?
So there was a notice that was sent out, to my understanding. So as those notices appear, that means it's going to be happening, to my understanding. Again, I can contact Board of Health or look on their website and they would have more information on that, just like on the CMMCP website, where it's not the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, other than just managing and maintaining our properties, wetland jurisdictional areas. I don't have that information on hand, and I apologize for that.
It might be as soon as this Monday.
Yeah.
I believe it was supposed to be this past Monday and it got pushed. And that's why I was surprised. I had no idea that they had even started testing yet.
Yeah.
And I think if we, even if it's redundant, it's belt and suspenders. If we are, keeping conservation areas out of the spray zone, whether or not it's redundant, we're better off. I mean, I can see even just along 495, all that conservation land, that doesn't have anything that applies to the 100-foot offset. I mean, maybe some tiny parts, but
yeah, there's vernal pools off of that. Yeah.
I just feel like it kind of, it ensures that we're capturing every property, conservation property.
Unless you're doing an aerial spray on conservation land, it really isn't going to do any good anyway. So you're doing mosquitoes for the first 50 feet, which is most people's yards, okay. But for conservation land, you're going to get attacked once you go, sooner or later you get in there. So unless you're going to do an aerial spray, what good is it actually going to do anyway?
Right.
Good point. All right. Because it seems like we should give you an answer tonight, just not knowing when the first spraying could start. We should probably send you in a direction tonight, whether we want to exclude or not exclude.
That would be appreciated.
So that said, are people comfortable voting on that tonight? Do you think you've heard enough, seen enough?
I'm
Do
comfy.
we think at least 4 people want to vote and the others can abstain, depending?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to read more on it still, though, myself. I don't know enough, Brian.
Okay.
I don't like it. I want to read some details on it.
Okay. All right.
No, can we just extend, all right, the first spraying. So at this moment, we can say we don't want to spray, and the next spray we may want to join. Is that an option?
Yes, I believe you can exclude your property and then take it out of the exclusion following.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would.
I actually excluded. I mean, there was a place on Mass.gov that you could go to that specifically said, I don't want them spraying near 5 Manor Road.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's what I would have to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I did that to 5 Manor Road, so we're safe here. But
I did that to 25 as well. We have a full side of the street.
Full side of the street.
It's
No.
basically just a wetland in front of our houses.
That's where the mosquitoes are going to hang out.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good. I'm not in favor of spraying. I'm not in favor of people getting triple E either. But
Exactly.
All right. So it seems like we can vote tonight and then revisit if we want. We can always throw it on our next agenda if we're looking to change our minds on what we're looking at tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But for the purposes of this evening, I'd like to make a motion that the Conservation Commission votes to exclude our properties from the spraying until further notice.
Second.
All those in favor, Jeff,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well.
Thank you. Just a few other, and I will send that link for the town website directing you to the CMMCP website.
Thank you.
And then I will also include the CMMCP website link directly as well. And I'll confirm what link is best to use for that information that we seem to have some questions on this evening.
I have some notes too, Rebecca. I don't know if I can send those out. I could just
Yeah, if you want to
That's
send
all.
those to the commission, that I
just
think
some
would be great.
summary notes and some of my questions that I had and answers from Tim. Some of my concerns that seem like they're pretty general concerns from everyone here, but I'm happy to share those.
Those would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, that would be great if you could send them to me though, Emily.
Okay.
And then just so we're not violating open meeting law, and then I will send them out individually to the commission for purposes of sharing of information. But again, no discussions on over email, please. A couple other items. We have installed the story walk again. We, in collaboration with the teen group at the Bolton Public Library at Fifeshire Dam Conservation Area. It is the book called The Woods by Paul Hope. So visit the property. It's around the upper pond, so the smaller pond out of the two. And it's a wonderful book for that area. We also I did want to note our intern and myself have been removing invasive species from Bowers and Fifeshire. The public safety had it requested that we trim back, which we're able to do as part of our regular maintenance of Bowers, trim back the vegetation along the lower side of the pond. And the majority of that is invasive species. So we've been chipping away at that. Where the camp is going on currently, I'm not encouraging our intern to go to the property since there's already an overload of individuals there with the camp and then just regular users. But once camp ends, we'll send her, and if we have the second intern, back over to work on that as well. One question I did want to ask the commission under our maintenance and management items is our volunteers the Bolton Trails Committee is anxious to get back out to do our trail work that we do every year and hold events and hold trail walks and be able to carry on as normal. Unfortunately, under the emergency order, we can't carry on as normal, but as a sort of midway point to allow for the work to continue, I was able to test out and go through a volunteer training video that is specific to volunteers working on trails or conservation properties or preservation properties during concerns with COVID-19. So talking about wearing masks and all those precautionary items. So my inquiry to the commission, and I will then confirm with the town administrator that it's okay. Would the commission be comfortable if I had any volunteer who's wanting to work on the conservation properties or for a volunteer event, go through this video training? It's about 12 minutes and 47 seconds. It's provided by the UNH Extension School. And it does, at the end, ask you about 4 questions about the main points of the training. And then it does provide you with a certificate of completion with their name on it. And I would be requiring them to send that to me so that we have it on record as well. Additionally, we would be limiting the number of volunteers. We would require registration. And if we are allowing work events or work parties, but they're not parties right now, I would map out specified work areas prior and make sure that they're more than 20 feet apart, which on our properties that need the most maintenance, that's quite doable. And I think we'd be able to keep people apart from one another. Again, they'd be volunteers, so same household would be fine to work together, just like under the guidelines that were given under the CDC guidelines. And I'd also double check with Board of Health. But just, I'm curious what the commission thinks about that, or if we want to hold off until the emergency order is lifted.
No, I took the course today, and it wasn't that difficult. And I think it's actually a good thing to just let people know that we're really concerned about this and to make sure that they're out there paying attention to what's going on. I don't think it's that much of a intrusion in their life, to be honest with you.
Since it would seem to me like most of our regular volunteers can watch a video like that and understand and appreciate the important points of it and actually follow through. That would be my only question. I don't have a problem with starting those work parties. I think it's a good time to get people outside. I think it is one of those things we can do in a responsibly socially distanced way. It's just making sure that people understand what the rules are as you laid them out, or as it says in that video.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would be more than comfortable with them being out on the properties.
And we would note something as well. I would be present during any of these work parties or work events, and to ensure that the policies in place that we will put in place are being followed. And if they're not being followed, they'll be asked to leave the property, which is unfortunate. And I don't think we'd have any issues with any of our current volunteers. Certainly we would not. Right. But it's just, and I think that video and that certificate of completion really provides a backup to say, you went through this training, you provided me with a certificate of completion. You're not give them a warning. And then if it's repeat, you have to leave the property. You're not going to participate in the event. And unfortunately, that's what we really need to abide by if we're going to even carry out these events.
All right. Other questions or thoughts?
I'm all for this. It just,
thanks, Jeff.
The video just sort of reiterates what you should be doing anyway, not 6 feet and not handling tools and having sanitizer and washing your hands.
Yep.
I mean, simple things that you think people would remember that all of us often.
Common sense things.
Yes, hopefully. All right. Is there any opposition to this? It seems like people are very favorable. All right. Rebecca, do we need any kind of formal poll, or are you comfortable with just the conversation we had?
If you could do some sort of a formal poll so that I can reference that to the town administrator, just because I do want to make sure he is comfortable with it as well.
Okay. Then I would like to poll the commission their thoughts on allowing work parties or work teams with oversight back onto our conservation lands, provided they have gone through provided they are adhere to our COVID policies and the measures we discussed this evening. Polling the committee on this, a yes means you would be fine with it, and no means you think we should hold off on it. And I would start with Jeff.
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Kip?
Yes.
And I will go yes as well.
Okay, so what my next steps will be, I will draft up in a more formal manner the couple of policies, and then send it to and discuss it with Board of Health, the Neshoba Board of Health, and then just talk to the town administrator first to make sure that those policies are reflective of what the town can do. So there are a couple more steps, but I appreciate this first step.
Right.
The last item is just a note that we are in a level 2 drought. The announcement was given, I think July let me see the date.
June
June
24th.
24th. Thank
Yep.
you. And what it's important to note, not only just for your personal use and sustaining water consumption or changing your water consumption, they're suggesting to limit outdoor watering only after 5 p.m. or before 9 a.m. to help that, but also what it means for us as the commission and staff is that for notice of intent and abbreviated notice of resource area delineations, the observations that rivers have stopped flowing made on May 1st, 2020 and after may not be used to prove a perennial river is an intermittent stream with no riverfront area since the drought conditions do exist. And then I did include it on our town website as well, but it just includes some of the definitions related in that little segment that I just quoted. And again, the importance is if anyone is contesting a perennial stream at this time, they are unable to do so, and that is backdated to any observations made on May 1st and after. So that will be important until that announcement is, until there's an announcement made that states we are out of the level 2 drought, we are unable to consider those, and we'll have to refer that or relay that information to the applicant, which I will do, but there may be times where they still want to have the public hearing, and in that case, we'll have to clarify to them again that it can't be contested at this time.
Okay.
That is
Does anybody else have anything else to add this evening? All right, then I will make everybody's favorite motion that we hereby adjourn the Friday, July 10th meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. And I'll start with, does anybody second?
Second.
Can't write second fast enough. Let's go with Jeff,
Yes.
Lori,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. See everybody in a few weeks.